Okay, all righty, fine.
Okay, we are here with Dr. Temple Grandin, and Temple is an amazing person. Our mission is to move the needle of understanding, as everyone knows, uh, um, and success around autism and neurodiversity the fastest way possible globally. And as a gemologist by trade, we set out on a mission to discover the spark in everyone. And we found 81 gems along the path. And to lead this mission, and Temple Grandin is leading the charge. What hasn't Dr. Temple Grandin achieved in her lifetime? Her bio is too impressive to boil down to a few words. Suffice it to say, she is the most well-versed person on autism and has a phenomenal perspective to share with everyone on the planet. This is why she is the subject of an Emmy award-winning movie starring Clara Danes titled Temple Grandin, and was honored in Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People in the World because she is. She has and continues to change the world for not only the autism world, but for her extremely important passion and areas of expertise in which she has revolutionized the cattle industry globally. Please welcome Dr. Temple Grandin.
Well, it's really great to be here. And I think we want to start talking about the importance of early intervention. I'm
Yes.
a professor of animal science today, but I had no speech until age 4. And when I was very young, I looked really severe. And I was really lucky to get into very good early intervention by 2.5. And there were 3 main goals in my program. Eye contact was not one of them. The first was speech. And my speech teacher would hold up a cup and she'd go cup, and then she'd go cup. She'd say it both slowly and say it regular. And then I got praised for saying it. I was always encouraged to use my words. If I wanted something like juice, they'd say, now use your words. Another little hint is wait for the child to respond. I like electronic analogies. These kids are like a phone with 1 bar of service. It takes time for it to download a web page. Wait for the kid to respond. Might be 10 or 15 seconds. The other big emphasis with me was turn taking. So if the child likes to line up blocks, let's take turns lining up blocks. Then as they get more speech, it's taking turns at board games. Learning how to wait and take turns, so important. And then skills, toothbrushing, hand washing, getting dressed. And if the teacher's doing a good job, you should be getting progress, and the child should like going to therapy. A good teacher has the knack and just knows just how hard to push. Push too hard, the child goes into sensory overload. You don't push at all, there's no progress. And I had some very good teachers. And if you have a young child, 2 or 3 years old, that's not talking, the worst thing you can do is to do nothing. You've already got a diagnosis. They're not talking. So rule out deafness and rule out some physical problem with the throat or the mouth. And then you need to get working with them.
What about adolescence? Is that a challenging time for people?
Oh, adolescence was my worst time, bullied and teased. Now, when I was younger, when I was, like 7 or 8 years old, my mother always encouraged my ability in art. Take the thing the kid's good at, expand on it. I was drawing the same horse head over and over again. The mother said, let's draw the whole horse. Let's draw the stable. Take that interest and expand it. You can read about horses. You can do all kinds of things with horses. Adolescence was the worst part of my life. I was bullied and teased. And the only places I was not bullied was friends through shared interests. And for me, it was horses, model rockets, and electronics. These are places where I had friends. This is where we got to help these kids get friends through an activity they can do with other kids. For another kid, it might be music. It could be band. It could be a chess club. It could be a photography club. It could be a lot of different things.
I remember one time you were telling me about the kids that climbed up on top of the school with a little spaceship, and they were bullying you because they were kind of making fun. They said that it was like a spaceship flying outside of your window.
Oh, well, that was one little trick I pulled on the other girls. I made a little 50s style flying saucer with a Dairy Queen dish on top for dome with a little flashlight in it. And I swung it in front of the girls' windows, and they thought it was a real flying saucer. I pulled off a really good flying saucer hoax.
That's so cute. And what about education and school education and career?
Well, this is something I'm very concerned about. The different kinds of thinkers. I'm an extreme object visualizer. So by the time I got into high school, I could not do algebra. But what object visualizers are good at are mechanical things, art, photography, and working with animals. Then you have another kind of mind, that's your pattern thinker, your mathematician. This is your little mathematician kid that needs to be moved ahead in math. And then you have the word thinkers that learn lots of facts. And this is my new book, Visual Thinking, The Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions. And I'm very concerned that we are losing skills, especially with the object visualizers. There's a lot of equipment we don't make anymore in the US, such as poultry processing equipment. It comes from Holland. And the reason for that is in ninth grade, the child can either go university route or go the tech route. And we have a tendency here to stick our nose up at the tech route. And what I have found in engineering is two parts of engineering. There's the mathematical part, and then there's what I call the clever engineers that make all kinds of mechanical devices. They just invent them out there in the shop. And you need both kinds of minds to build something like a large food processing plant.
That's for sure. You need all kinds of minds out there in the world to do everything.
And one of the worst things schools have done is taking out hands-on classes. Art, sewing, woodworking, welding, automobile shop. And how can a kid find out they might like those things if they never try them? There's a lot of kids get addicted to video games. You know what's been really successful in getting some of these kids off of video games? Automobile mechanics. And they find out that motors are more interesting than video games.
Wow.
Yeah, no, seriously. And then they've gone into decent jobs like fixing trains. It has led to really good jobs. So you got a video game addict. When we introduce them to fixing things.
Wow, that's interesting. I know Stephen Shore used to love to fix bicycles.
Well, that's right. That's right. You see, and Stephen Shore and I have a lot of the same views. I'm going to be on a conference tomorrow with Stephen Shore.
Yeah.
And he had a business fixing bicycles in his college dorm. And the other big problem I'm seeing with a lot of fully verbal individuals on the spectrum is they're not learning working skills.
Yeah.
Working skills are very different than school and academic school skills. And we need to be making a slow transition from school to work. Let's start with some volunteer jobs outside the home. You know, maybe at a church or whatever, or some other place of worship, walking dogs, where they're doing something on a schedule and the boss is outside the family. It's somebody else's dog they're walking.
Yeah,
that's really, really important. And then the instant they're legal working age, they need to get some jobs. And I just want to give you some tips to make those jobs successful. Let's avoid the rapid multitasking chaos like a McDonald's takeout window. Let's not go there. You know, let's go more quieter retail jobs. The other thing is, if I was a computer, I'd be an Intel 286, very small processor, but I have tons and tons and tons of memory. And I don't need working memory to do design work. And in fact, the way I used to sell jobs is I just showed off pictures of my drawings. In fact, here are some of my drawings in my book, Thinking in Pictures, in my old book. Wow. And the way I sold the jobs was to show off my drawings. And what I have a problem with is I cannot remember long strings of verbal information. Let's say it's something simple, like I got to clean the ice cream machine at McDonald's. And they go yakety yak, 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 yak through the steps. I can't remember that. Give me a pilot's checklist. Tear down steps, cleaning steps, reassembly steps. Pilots are required to use a checklist on every single flight. And this is a very, very easy accommodation that would save a lot of jobs. And there's two kinds of pilot's checklists. There's tasks you do every day, like maybe cleaning the ice cream machine, for example. And then let's say you were working in a store, you're going to stock different shelves, different products each day. So then you make a checklist of the products that I'm going to stock. Okay, shampoos, soap, maybe I do that one day, and then it's the soup aisle. Another day I restock. And then so I don't have to remember that long string of verbal information. There'd be a lot of jobs saved with pilots checklists. This is a very simple, easy accommodation. And it's basically an external working memory.
I really like that. I can
Very, very simple, easy thing to do.
My dad was an aeronautical engineer, and we always had lists, things to do. Number one, you do this. Number two, you do that. Number three, you do that.
Yeah, that's right. And they just have to be keywords that jog the memory. In fact, you can look up pilots checklists. Like for a small airplane, it's like 10 or 11 things on it. And they're just 1 to 3 words, 1 to 3 key words to jog the memory. They're not written in narrative. They're bullet points that are 1 to 3 key words. And of course, the pilot knows what flaps mean. That would be an example of one of the things might be on there. And then for the big airplanes, they chunk it like pre-taxi, pre-takeoff. So you're not throwing a 100-item checklist at the pilot. It's put in chunks.
Yeah.
You can find them online for lots of different aircraft. And I think it's a very simple accommodation. Like I heard a sad story of a guy who lost an electrician's apprentice job because the boss would go yak, 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 yak on the light fixtures and the light switches, and then he'd install the wrong stuff. Where if he had just written down the type of fixtures to install in different places, the type of light switches to install in different places, it would have taken like 2 minutes. Then he would not have lost the job.
Wow.
Those are 2 very simple accommodations. Well, the rapid multitasking, avoid it. And then for other jobs, checklists.
That's very, very, very helpful. And so vocation and employment are very key areas for people on the spectrum too. What can you talk about that?
Well, this is where I'm seeing a lot of kids where they're doing a good job with the academics, but they're not doing a good job with the life skills. I'm seeing too many kids totally overprotected, maybe a teenager that's fully verbal, and they have never gone in a store and bought something by themselves and talked to the store staff. They are not learning life skills. And that, I mean, that was stuff I was doing when I was 7 and 8 years old.
Right.
They are not doing. And this is a very big problem. They sort of think, well, they're too handicapped or too disabled to do these things. And I'm seeing this problem all the time.
Yeah, they need to be taught to get out there and do it anyway. And
then the other big thing is sensory. And okay, let's say I just had a 45-minute conversation in the airport today with a dad whose 3-year-old is very, very sound sensitive. And afraid of the vacuum cleaner, afraid of it, things that make noise. And one of the ways to help get over that is let the child turn that vacuum cleaner on and off. Let them have control of that vacuum cleaner. And I've talked to 3 or 4 families where giving that kid control of that vacuum cleaner turned it from the most feared thing to their favorite toy. Because they turn it on and off. They control it. Now, another little hint is if you wear earphones all the time, it's going to make sound sensitivity worse. It makes it worse. So what you can do is have them with you for control, but try not to wear them. And then in the places like those really awful bathrooms with all those hand dryers and stuff, yeah, you put it on for that. Or maybe the train pulling into the station, just some really bad stuff like that. But you can always have it with you.
Right.
Giving the child control. And then another sensory thing that's a problem for a lot of autistic people, ADHD people, and some dyslexic people is flicker on LED lights. That can be a really bad problem. You know how you can find out which LEDs flicker? Because I don't have the problem. I found out from a lighting contractor that you pull your phone out and you set it for slow motion video. And then you take up pictures of the room in slow motion video. And I'd recommend waving. So when you play it back, you're sure it's in slow motion. And you can see the bad LED lights. And you just put it regular slow motion, not super slow motion, just regular slow motion. And you need to find LEDs that don't flicker. Also, some computer monitors will flicker. Now, the one thing that does not flicker is iPads, tablets, and laptops. They do not flicker. but some of the TVs and some of the other monitors may flicker. You need to test them with the phone.
Interesting.
And I don't know all the reasons why some flicker and some don't, but I do know that you can find economically priced LEDs that do not flicker. So what do we do if we're stuck in a classroom or an office and there's no windows? Otherwise, I'm going to put the kid over by the window. Let's say there's no windows. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go out and buy a lamp, and I'm going to find a really bright LED that does not flicker.
Mm-hmm.
And you put that next to the desk at the school or the desk at the office to blot out the flickering LED light. These are just some very simple things that you can do that can make a big difference.
That's good advice. Now, what about money and finances? I know a lot of people struggle with money and how to create it, how to manage it.
Well, let's make money real.
Yes.
Money has to be, I have to think of money into what are the real things I can buy with. So when I was 8 years old, I got 50 cents a week for allowance. Now, back in the 50s, that was like $5 today. And with that money, I could buy 5 Superman comics. I could get 10 candy bars. But if I wanted a 69-cent toy airplane, I had to save for 2 weeks. I was learning that at 7 and 8 years old. Okay, so how do I understand bigger amounts of money? Mm-hmm. Well, one of my favorite toys was a table hockey set that I got for Christmas. And you get things for Christmas that were more expensive things. And I saw that hockey table in the toy store window, and it was $21. And I added that up, and that was almost a year's worth of allowance.
Wow.
You see, you have to relate money back, different kind of amounts of money by different things. Like $5, you get a McDonald's meal. I'm not going to buy a steak for $5. I can get a shirt for $30. This is how to understand money is you can kind of put like different amounts of money into different categories and what some of the stuff you can buy. I'm not going to buy a car for $100, for example.
Right. And how young can
by
they be?
Taking different amounts of money and converting it to real things. That's how I understand money. Or I think I've often thought when I'm pumping gas that if I worked at the local meatpacking plant, I'd have to work half a shift to fill up my car. Okay, see, that's making the money real.
Okay. And how young can you be to start out on this path of learning about money?
7 and 8 years old. I was 7 and 8 years old.
Yeah.
And learning to save for the 69-cent airplane that I could not buy with 50 cents.
Wow. So we could start these kids out really young.
Really young, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
And you're saying 50 cents back then would be about like $5 today.
Right on.
Yeah, that
and one thing I didn't think about, like when I was going through raising my kids, is where is my child going to live when I get older? Living plans and, that sort of thing. Do you have any ideas around that?
Well, I think that can be a big issue.
Right.
That can be a really big issue.
Yeah. Because
the other thing that a lot of people that are, autistic, if they have their own business, they're going to need somebody to help them run the business.
Yeah.
That is something they're going to need.
Yeah. So I know the last time I interviewed you is about 11 years ago. And the question I asked was way too vague, you said. But how do you want to make the biggest impact in the world in where you are right now? You already have.
I find just giving out this real practical information.
Yeah.
Like I found out that I got 4 families now, 3 where they got their kid to love a vacuum cleaner by letting them turn it on. And the other family was an electric leaf blower, not the gasoline one, electric leaf blower. And the kid was terrified of it. And then when he got to turn it on and off and play with it, then he thought it was the greatest thing that ever was.
Makes you feel really good, doesn't it?
Those are things where I want to just give out to people these very, very simple things that people can do that can make a big difference. Like talking about the important things with the early intervention. Now, on the other hand, we don't, in talking to this family today at the airport about the vacuum cleaner, they made the mistake of taking the child to the big county fair right when it was super busy. That was a mistake. That was too overwhelming. But what I suggested is let's take the child to the supermarket when it's not busy
Right.
and then help them pick out food and put it in the cart.
Mhm.
But we do it when the store is not busy. No, we don't throw them into sensory overload and going to the county fair when it's the super busy. That was a mistake.
Yeah.
That was definitely a mistake.
But then you have to, I guess there's resiliency and being able to bounce back from that. And then, you know,
But giving the kid control of it. Okay,
mhm.
let's say we're going to go to Walmart or some other store. We go there when it's not busy. Then maybe a kid could raise his hand like this when he's had enough Walmart, and you'll take him out. In other words, by giving the kid some control of the dreaded sensory. Now, soft clothes against my skin is something I'm going to need.
Mhm.
You're not going to get wool against my skin. Sit on an airplane and have wool against my skin. That's going to drive me crazy. I've got to find pants that don't itch if I got to sit on a plane for a long time. But that doesn't mean that the only thing you wear is sweatpants.
No.
Also, all things that go against my skin, I wash them before I wear things that go against my skin. And that helps.
Yeah. You've been involved in the Autism Today conferences since our beginning in '98. You taught my son how to drive. That was really, really helpful.
Well, driving, it's going to take longer. We need to do a lot more practice in a totally safe place because you've got to get the operation of the vehicle, steering, brakes, and the gas into motor memory where you don't have to think about it before you do traffic. And that solves the multitasking issue. A lot more practice in totally safe places like giant parking lots, open fields, backcountry roads.
Mm-hmm.
And when I learned to drive, it was either 3 miles or 6 kilometers up to my aunt's mailbox. And we did that 6 days a week. And very quickly, I racked up 200 miles of driving in a very safe place and then carefully went into traffic. That's what we did.
You have been a world of help for so many people. I know to my family, to so many families out there. You just keep continuing to help so many people.
Well, I like to just think of, simple things to do. And then talking to this family, they heard about some treatments that were really far out, expensive stuff. Let's just work on basics.
Mm-hmm.
Like letting the child play with the vacuum cleaner. And turned out in this house, they had 3 vacuum cleaners. Well, we can take the noisiest one and that'll be hers. And where she controls it. See, that's the key. And then that vacuum cleaner goes to something fun to play with.
Yes.
Get obsessed with vacuums. Well, then that can go to an interest in mechanical things. And we need people to fix mechanical things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've heard you talk so much about diverse minds and your new book.
And this is what this book is about, because right before COVID, I went to a poultry plant and 2 pig processing plants, and all the equipment came from Holland.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out that the state-of-the-art electronic chip making machine for computer chips comes from Holland. You see, this goes back to taking too many skilled trades classes out of the schools. I worked with a lot of people that owned metal fabrication shops that were probably autistic.
So
special ed builds the stuff. I'm saying that seriously. And that's what this book is all about. And I talked to a lot of business leaders, and I said, we need to hire neurodiverse people. We need those skills. If you'd like the mechanical systems and you're building the function, you need these skills. You'd like the water system to function.
You are so brilliant. How do you see the world partnering with other organizations globally to make this move faster and better?
Well, I've talked about it. And what I have found from talking about I've done these talks for years, is there's certain things that always keep coming up. And I'm finding like a simple way to deal with the sound sensitivity is to let the child control it. One family took their kid down to the fire station and he turned on the siren and helped get over the fear of sirens.
Yeah.
Okay, dogs barking, you're going to have to use an audio recording. But then you let the child control that audio recording of dogs barking.
Yeah, I think control is important. Choice.
Control is the key. That is the key. Control is the key.
That is good. Yes, I think so too. I think so too.
Control is the key.
Great.
Yeah, this is, and these are simple things. And then the pilot's checklist would save a lot of jobs. And that's a very, very simple accommodation. And then let's not put them on the multitasking chaos. I remember going into a store and they had a Christmas wrapping station for presents. It was chaos. And I go, and it was at a bookstore, which normally would have been a really good job, but not that wrapping station at Christmas time. Absolute chaos.
Christmas time is crazy.
No, this is where you don't start the job.
No.
You know, now I look at where there's been failures. Chaotic clothing store at Christmas. That did not work.
No, I can't imagine it working.
But then you take fast food. One McDonald's figured out just a very simple accommodation. The autistic lady was running the cash register, but when it got busy, they put her to cleaning tables. See, that's just a real simple accommodation. See, people are always looking for some magic, you know, something they go out, some magic treatment or something. And I can tell you on the early intervention, it's good teachers. They make such a difference. And you got a 3-year-old that's not talking. The worst thing to do is to do nothing. If you can't get official services, you get some grandmothers to work with the kids. You know, and then I've got a book called The Way I See It. That will give Granny a lot of hints on how to work with the little kids. It's called The Way I See It. Here it is right here. The Way I See It.
Yes, that's an excellent book.
And get started working with this kid. Because doing nothing is the worst thing you can do.
Those are great words. Those are very important words.
And when I've, you know, and then twice I've had moms come up to me at the airport to get pictures, and their teenager has never gone shopping. Well, I've dealt with that. I gave a girl a $5 bill and told her to go in the store across the hall and buy something, and she bought a drink and brought me back the change. Then I gave another kid a $5 bill and then found out the store didn't take cash. But at least, and then we went in there and got him. But I was standing there with the mom, and she wanted to go in there so bad. Right out in the hall, we could see this. But they're not learning these most basic things.
Yeah, they need to let go. I mean, yeah.
Well, and I'm talking about the store was right there. We were sitting in the gate room and could see it.
Wow.
It was right there.
Huh. Yeah.
And they're not doing these things.
Wow. But no, it's good for them to let go and let their kids experience life and try things out, you know, experience.
Well, that's right. You see, and then I have my kids' project books, like this is Calling All Minds kids' project book to get kids out doing things. It has all my airplane and parachute projects I had as a kid. Now, here's another little tip for reading.
That's
some
great.
Dyslexics, some people with head injuries, and some autistic people will complain about the print jiggling on the page. Try different light-colored pastel papers. See how the back of this book, that's light blue? Try the pale colors, light blue, lavender, gray, tan. I had a girl at a veterinary conference just recently looked at a little light blue ticket and says, I can read that. It was light blue with black print on it. Experiment with different colored backgrounds and different fonts on the computer. This can sometimes help. It doesn't work for all dyslexics.
No.
Only works for subgroup. But when it works, it works. And it's something that costs nothing to try. I've got a book called The Girl Who Loves Cows by Cy Montgomery. It's got pastel papers. I've had people open that book up and say, I can read.
Wow.
You know, I like to think of these simple things that people can do that can sometimes really make a big difference.
That's so important to so many families out there.
Well, that's what I figure I need to be doing now. And I find that I've been doing this long enough that I'm now finding things that in food safety, we call them critical control points,
Right.
where there were core criteria or key indicators, things that come up over and over again, like the pilot's checklist.
Mhm.
There's countless jobs that would save. And it's such a simple accommodation.
Wow. So what
And
is
if
your
people
next?
don't want to do it, tell them that pilots do it every single flight.
Yeah, what makes so much sense?
And now now aviation has taught doctors to do it.
I grew up with it, so it just seems like it's natural to me. But
Yeah, they have to do the checklist to make sure they set the flaps on the plane.
huh.
Make sure they put the landing gear down.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad, yeah, he worked at Piper and Boeing and Swearingen and all.
So he was in aviation.
He was, yes. Totally. So we always grew up with that. So it just seems like second nature and common sense.
But it's not second nature in fields outside of aviation. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
But no,
it's
it's very.
such a simple accommodation
Mm-hmm.
that lots of times the simplest accommodations, like colored paper, finding LED lights that don't flicker. Now, the thing is, that doesn't bother everybody. They don't bother me. But I would say across all the autism people, maybe 25% have a problem with LED lights, and the rest don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's
That's.
a subtype.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that have a problem with it have a big problem with it.
Yeah. Well, I know certain things bother me, like the fan. If I don't have a fan on at night, I can't sleep.
Yeah, okay. But that's a simple thing. They have a fan on at night. That's a simple thing to do.
Mm-hmm. So there's just different things for different people, like just you have to just be sensitive to the needs of the person, the child, the adult.
The other problem you got with autism is you've got such a broad spectrum now because they've been changing the guidelines. I mean, in the 80s, you had to have speech delay to be labeled autistic.
Wow.
And then in the early 90s, they did the Asperger's, socially awkward with no speech delay. 2013, they mixed it all together.
Uh-huh.
And so now you have this huge spectrum where you're going from Einstein, who had no speech until age 3,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now to somebody that doesn't speak. But some of the individuals that cannot speak can learn to type.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that needs to be encouraged.
Oh, yes.
And it's best to use tablets because when you type on tablets on the virtual keyboard, the print appears right next to the keyboard. See, they cannot make the attention shift. Like on this desktop, this keyboard's way down here, and then the print appears way up here. They can't make the attention shift. When they touch the key, they got to see the letter. And that's why you use the tablet.
Oh, okay.
Where the print appears next to the keyboard. That's really important. Or you can use some little thing where the print always appears next to the keyboard. That's real important.
That's interesting.
These are some things that over the years have come up over and over and over again. And then in my mind, I kind of make them on a spreadsheet that these are things that we need to be doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's so many things to think about, and then analyze and do a comparative analysis on. What do you have in in the future? What are you planning to do?
Well, I mean, right now I'm just talking about the kinds of stuff that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because I'm finding that, people need this information.
They do desperately.
They need is just basics. Because too often people look for something complicated and expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing the little kids need is lots of one-on-one interaction with an effective teacher. That gets the three things I want: speech, turn taking, skills, and the kids should like going to therapy. That's what I want out of 3-year-olds. It's that simple.
And how important is family and like relationships? Like how important have they been?
Well, that's really important. Yeah, that's really important. You know, some kids, it's very traumatic if they lose a parent. You know, that's terrible. Lose important people in their life. That's important.
Okay. The glue that holds us all together, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, one of the things that, you know, an autistic kid was really upset when his uncle died. The uncle really liked fishing and had kept some of his fishing gear. And I said, well, let's go fishing with some of the uncle's fishing gear, and that's how we'll remember him. And we'll use his fishing rod. You
Wow.
see, that's the kind of thing that would appeal to an autistic kid. We'll remember Uncle Jim by, you know, we're going to use his fishing rod and go out and do what he liked to do, and you like to do it too.
Yeah. Temple, I could talk to you for hours. You have so many things to share with us. I know that. Do you have any more final words that you want to say?
Well, I want to see the kids that are different get out and be successful. That's what I want to see. And I get asked all the time, what would I do if I could change the schools? I'd put all the hands-on classes back in, because there's a lot of kids that can excel. Now, if you have one of the kids that's a math genius, move them ahead in math.
Right.
Move them ahead in math. Old-fashioned numbers math, not this weird verbal stuff they're doing. Old-fashioned number. You might have a third grade or primary school kid that needs to be doing a high school algebra book. Algebra book doesn't do me any good. It's a door stop. But for another kid, it might be a door. But if you don't expose him to the higher math, how would you know whether or not he could do it? It's that simple. A math textbook doesn't cost very much. There's tons of stuff that's free online.
Stephen Shore and I just finished doing a course for the School of Rock to teach the music teachers how to teach kids music, because they're struggling with the sensory and behavior. But like, I'd love to see more music in the schools again, like orchestra.
Oh, music needs to be in the schools. Now, I had a little flute when I was a child. I couldn't figure out how to play it, but another kid will. No, music should definitely be in the schools.
Yeah.
All of these: cooking, sewing, music, theater, all of these things. Woodworking, mechanics, computer programming. All of these things that can turn into careers.
Right.
Because what I found is kids get interested in stuff they get exposed to.
Yes.
If they're not exposed to it, how can they get interested in it?
Yes.
They've got to be exposed.
They do. They do. That's great.
Got to be exposed.
That's wonderful. So that is so true. So do you have any final words to our audience?
Well, let's, you know, when you're talking to new parents, if you have a child that's not talking, worst thing you can do is wait. Let's say you have a child that loves cars. Well, then take that interest in cars and broaden it. Read about cars, do math with cars, do things where you take that car fixation and you broaden it. Because I had a horse head fixation that was way too fixated on single drawing horse heads. No, you want to take that thing and you want to broaden it. That's what you want to do. Broaden that interest.
Nice.
And then you also teach social skills. And I have a lot of granddads that come up to me and grandmoms that come up to me. They find out they're autistic when the kids get diagnosed later in life. That's why I did this book right here, Different Not Less. 18 people telling their stories diagnosed later in life. Now, it was almost a relief on their relationships. But these people all had jobs. And you see, in the 50s and the 60s, manners and all that stuff was taught in a much more structured way. Kids were taught to shake hands. Kids were taught to say please and thank you. And if a kid made a social mistake, like let's say I stirred my drink with my finger, they didn't scream no, they'd say use the spoon. They would give the instruction instead of screaming no. That's what they did.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you being part of the World Autism Summit. You've been amazing. So thank you so much, so much. And
Well, it's good to be here, and I'm sorry I was late, but we got a chance to finally talk and just pass along, some really good tips.
Yes. And how can people get in touch with you?
They can through you. They can get in touch. You know how to get in touch with me.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, they can
Okay.
get in touch with you and they can get in touch with me. I think that's the best thing to do.
Okay.
Also, they can go to templegrandin.com, my webpage.
Okay.
I have a place where you can write to me there. It's templegrandin.com. That's my autism webpage, and grandin.com is my livestock webpage. But the best way to get in touch with me is just go to templegrandin.com.
And everybody should see your movie.
Oh, yeah, the Temple Grandin movie. Yep. And one thing the movie shows really right is how I think visually.
Yes.
That is shown accurately in the movie. And the projects shown in the movie, I did those projects.
Yes.
Those were all projects I did when I was in high school and during the 1970s when I was in my 20s. Those dipping vat projects.
And
I
you were
did
also
those
in our
projects.
books too.
Yeah.
Yes. Okie dokie. Thank you, Temple.
Well, great to talk to you. I'm going to sign off, and it was great to be here.
It was great to have you.
Okay, great. Okay, wonderful.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.